Yeah.
Evening, people. Right there.
Anytime you guys are ready, Chuck and Craig, we can get going. But
Okay, why don't we get started? I'd like to welcome everyone to the October meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair of the committee, and Craig Lader also is here, co-chair. And Will, do you want to go over and just talk about the general operating procedure?
absolutely, yeah. Well, welcome everybody. If this is your first time joining us virtually, or maybe the first time in a long time, you'll notice that you're currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting, except for our co-chairs, Chuck and Craig, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following each presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by clicking the raise hand button on your screen. You'll often find that under the reactions menu. It may also appear under the participant section, but look for the button that says raise hand. It's not the wave or the thumbs up. Those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute whenever you're called on. Once you're called on, be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support to help with the Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or the presenters. They will never see those chats. If you're using an old, or if you have any questions, you can always just chat with the Zoom software. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get attention. Look for the raise hand button or look for the chat if you're having problems. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Chuck and Craig.
Good, thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Okay, why don't we get going to the first item on our agenda is a request to install a 5G pole attachment on an existing street pole within 10 feet of an adjacent building on Madison Avenue between 77th and 78th Streets. That's the west side of the street. Is there anyone for the public who would like to comment on this particular item? If it is, you could, if there is, just raise your hand.
I saw Matt Bauer from the Madison Avenue bid is here, and oh, look, there he is.
There he is, Matt. Why don't we recognize Matt and unmute Matt? He's unmuted. See, okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you very much. No, just the only thing I just wanted to mention, and we spoke about this at the district cabinet meeting when this first came up, and Colleen has been great and has given us information. Stretch of Madison between 73rd and 78th Street, the poles are going to be changed to BC poles eventually. Councilmember Powers put money in the budget for it. This is to fill the rest of the historic district that didn't have Bishop's Square poles. And Colleen assured me, of course, that this project will not affect that they'll work something out. So that's it. Thank you. All good. It seems like a much better way of doing things than some of the other alternatives for putting 5G in our neighborhood. But thank you.
Okay. And are there any board members that want to comment on this at this point? I know we had just before the show, we've had this come before the board a few times, and we've had concerns about them if they're close to the buildings. And I don't know if anyone, I assume this was, posted around, or people were notified who were in this area. So if they wanted to come, they could come and talk about it. But we don't have anyone there. So why don't we call on Michelle Birnbaum?
Yes, hello, Miami. I'm sorry, I couldn't find my reactions. My screen, there
You're on,
seems to be,
you're on.
I'm on, okay. Are we going to have a presentation about this tonight?
Well, I don't know about a presentation. They just said they don't necessarily present. They just send a letter saying, you know,
You
we get
mean-
notice because it's within 10 feet.
So so City Bridge won't be here to show us what he's proposing and to discuss it?
No,
It's just like the ones we've done in the past, the ones that are attachments on top of the existing
I
pole.
know what it is. It's like a pod. I understand. Okay, that was my question. I'm sorry, we won't have them here to talk about it. Thank you.
maybe Matt, I could direct a question to Matt. Do you happen to know where this attachment, you know, it's 10 feet from the building? Is it right near the windows? I mean, do you have, I don't know if you know, you've been in that area. I mean, you know, obviously you know Madison Avenue, but can't say you know every building on it. But do you happen to know anything about that particular area?
Yeah, no, it's mid-block between, well, it's sort of the poles on the lamp poles on Madison Avenue alternate east, the mid-block poles alternate east and west. And so this is on the west side. It's the pole between between the edge of the Mark Hotel and the edge of the building where San Ambrose and La Perla have their stores, restaurant and store. You know, it's by the hotel. So, you know,
Is there any residential building? Any windows from a residence that can look out on it, even though it's claiming to be 10 feet away? Is there anything there that's looking out on it?
well, from across the street, there is a residential building directly
But not
across the street.
Yeah, across.
But not on that block as it's looking.
No, it's between the Mark. If you can see it on, you know, Google Maps. It's
Well, I can picture it. I know the street.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. No, it's
I
between
can
the
share my
Mark.
screen. I have it pulled up if,
I
All
actually
right, great.
I have
If
it as
that's
well
not,
if you
if
want.
that's easy to do, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's right between the Mark and the building that's
Oh,
so
so
the
it's
Mark.
between them. Okay. Gotcha. You have it.
Yeah, you see, right? It's like really right in the center between there. It's between those two buildings.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so far, there are no other pods on this pole at this time?
Not that.
Because
Well, that I
sometimes
know
there
of.
can be as many as 3 or 4, you know.
No, that's the only one we got notice of.
So this is the only one that's coming up. And to be 10 feet from this window, it would have to be installed about halfway at least, or up near the light, or is it down near the pole? Where is it installed?
That I have no idea.
They stick off the top of this post.
Just right on the top, Will?
Yeah, it's top of it. Yeah.
Okay. Now you're going to be converting to Bishop's Crook.
Eventually, yeah. It's in the budget.
So when that happens, what happens to this pod? Are they going to install it on the Bishop's Crook?
I don't know.
Hi,
But
Colleen
It's
can answer that.
Hey, it's Colleen from DOT. So when the Bishop Crook is installed, the pod is going to have to be removed. We're not allowing the pods to be on Bishop Crooks.
Okay.
That's as per the PDC guidelines.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So let me ask you one last question. Are these pods, when they're installed, are they currently activated, or are they waiting for activation for some other whatever?
I don't
Yeah.
think Colleen can answer that, but maybe
You
she
know what?
can.
These are questions that should be addressed to OTI, not DOT, because this is their project. Okay.
And
I see.
Okay.
I can fill in a little bit based on what they've done with the 91st Street one. The
Yeah.
91st Street one, they installed it and then they still haven't activated it. They still had problems, or maybe they just recently did and I missed it. But as of this summer, they still hadn't even activated it yet. So there is some lag between whenever they install and whenever they become active.
Well, I tell you, that was my understanding. And that's why I'm a little perplexed as to why they're bothering to do it on here with the acknowledgement that it's going to come off. And when the bishop's crooks go in. So, and we don't even know that it's going to be activated. So those are answers I would have liked to know. But to me, this is sort of, you know, I don't have enough information.
Okay.
But anyway, if that's what we have, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, considering where it is, you know, if we don't, we're just asked to comment on it. If we can comment or not. If we don't comment, I mean, you know, just move forward with it. And we have objected to some of these, but usually it's because someone comes here who is directly near it and has a complaint about it, and that didn't happen. And we can see, because it's not really that directly near one of the windows, as Craig showed on that Google Maps thing. So unless somebody wants to take any action on this, we can just not do anything and at this point, and proceed. Is anyone okay? I know, sensing none, and I think that's probably right. Why don't we go on?
Chuck, before you move on, there's a hand up from Stephanie Reckler.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Stephanie. Go ahead, Stephanie. It's on.
It looks to me like the hotel windows will be affected. Do we not consider the hotel residences?
Well, first of all, it hasn't been activated, and secondly, the hotel people go in and out. They're not. I mean, they have some permanent residents. I'm not sure where they are, but we don't know whether they're affected. But the hotel, I assume, was notified about this, and we haven't heard from them.
Matt, I shared this with you. I assume you shared it with the hotel.
I did share it with the hotel. Yes.
Okay, so they didn't raise an objection to it, Stephanie. So it's hard to speculate on exactly who might be affected, you know. And if it's just transient people coming in, that's much, you know, less exposure. Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, we have Judy Schneider, and then I'll figure out who this other person is.
Right, figure out the phone number. Oh, Judy, you're unmuted. Judy.
I we move the agenda.
Okay. All right. Is there somebody who else want to make a comment? I'm not sure who that is. Why don't we make this the last comment? It's a phone number 212 Maggie.
It's Maggie Lehman.
Maggie Lehman, yeah. Okay. Maggie, why don't you go ahead and make a comment?
Thank you. Just a quick question. What was the safety? I know we've talked so much about the safety implications. I called in about 6 minutes late, so if you addressed that already, my apologies, and we won't take time on it. That's my only question, because I know there's been so much discussion about the environmental review and health and safety implications of the pole so close, within 10 feet
Right.
of windows.
Yeah. No, that's obviously been an issue which we talked about in the board, and we have objected when it's very close to windows of residences. And but this is not the case here because it's right in the
The
middle.
hotel?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's more of a, and the hotel was notified and they did not raise any.
Because it's a hotel?
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, why don't we move the agenda as Judy suggested. Item 2 is a hearing on a request to modify the curbside parking regulations in front of 301 East 64th Street between 2nd and 1st Avenue to no parking or no standing zone. And we've had some, debate about various things on this. And is anyone here to talk about this?
Yeah, we have Zachary from.
Oh yeah, Zachary here. Okay, from Orchid Realty Corp. Yes. Yep, it's unmuted. So why don't you go ahead?
Thank you all very much for your time this evening. I represent the managing agent on behalf of Regency East Apartment Corp. That's the cooperative at 301 East 64th Street.
Excuse
Before
me
you,
one second, Zachary, can you tell me who owns this building? What kind of?
this is a cooperative. So I'm here on behalf of the board
it's a
of
co-op.
directors.
Okay, it's a co-op. Gotcha.
Yeah. Before getting into my presentation, I'd just like to depict a scenario. And is it all right if I share my screen briefly, just to give you an idea of what this block looks like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can share your screen for as long as you're making your presentation.
Right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we will start by showing you the exterior of Regency East Apartment Corp. Pretty typical Upper East Side cooperative. As we look over to the right, you'll see an Avis garage. And as we zoom in over here, you'll see a sign that says car return entrance. I just want to make note of that as I tell a little bit of a story. I'm sure some of you have experienced this. You arrive home after a weekend or after some time away from your home. You get up to the front of your building, and as you try and unload your car, you see a line of cars immediately to the right of you, double parked, 7 long, into the intersection. That's the example of what we are experiencing on a regular basis at 301 East 64th Street. The purpose is to depict exactly what is happening there and why it's so important, and why the board felt it was so important to bring this up to the community board in that way. What we frequently experience is residents in the building being unable to safely unload their cars in front of the building due to the fact that these double parked cars from the garage are taking up an entire lane of space along this street. What we're hoping to achieve as part of this meeting is a section of approximately 24 feet, and I personally was out there with a measuring tape between the Monday, Thursday sign here, and from what you see here, a commercial vehicle only sign right here. The goal of this no parking zone is to give about 24 feet of reprieve to the people who live in the building so that they can get in, get out, quickly move out of the way of any first responders who may be lined up behind them trying to get through to any number of the hospitals nearby. I want to make mention, and I'll jump over to the full presentation that I sent over to the community board. Bear with me one moment. Sorry, just pulling it up. And this presentation shows a little bit more of the specific details of the cooperative, what we're seeking to achieve, the double parking being the primary basis, safety, as I mentioned, being the primary basis for this requested 24 feet of space. In addition, we're also seeking a change to the 3-hour commercial vehicle parking that I also depicted that extends through to the garage that's at the building just a little ways down the street. That represents a little bit further, as you can see here, that be changed to be what the rest of the block is, which is Monday and Thursday alternate side parking, similar to the rest of the street. The goal there is to change it over because Bright Horizons, a childcare center, is there rather than Gourmet Garage, which was a grocery store. Therefore, we would not need any commercial parking in front. It is solely for pickup and drop off. I also want to make mention 64th Street is unique in that we are going to be getting a school that is replacing a garage. That construction is actually ongoing at this time. Just to highlight the fact that already the block is going to be changing in terms of its movement. And we already expect there to be significant backups on that street as well. All right. I'm happy to touch on any point or answer any questions, but wanted to keep it brief to save all of you time this evening.
Thank you. Well, let me just say in the beginning, and we'll get some comments from the public if they have them on the board. But our general view is that we, don't like to approve changes from alternate side of the street parking to special parking if we can avoid it, unless there are specialized circumstances. We have done it, but we try not to make habit of it because everyone has some of the same kinds of conditions. And the other thing to point out here is that asking for no parking anytime in the end, it may not be too helpful because plenty of people can park in no parking zones and do park in no parking zones. And that goes for trucks, that goes for doctors, that goes for, people with all kinds of, passes, parking passes and stuff. And so, that's not a particularly effective thing, but I'll recognize people who may want to speak on this. And we have someone I see from the public, I believe, that his name is Brett, and if you could give us your full name and meet you. Brett.
Sure. Hi there. Thank you for your time. My name is Brett Lemberger, a local resident. I live at 250 East 65th Street. Upstanding citizen, keeps a car in New York City, and I do park on the street here because I'm unhappy to learn that we might be taking away alternate side parking. This is a street that I circle and try to park on often, and you're a half a block away from where I reside, so definitely unhappy to hear that we might be losing alternate side parking. I am happy to hear that the board, maybe frowns upon this a little bit. I am happy to hear that we might be turning commercial only parking into alternate side parking. So just wanted to voice displeasure on behalf of a number of people who I know park in the area. It's frustrating to learn that we might be losing more spots. There's so many limitations in the area, outdoor dining, taking up parking spots, city bike, taking up parking spots. I think we're moving in the wrong direction at the moment. I think we need to create more opportunities for parking. So just wanted my voice to be heard tonight. And again, I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you. I see someone, Allegra Brill from the public.
Hi. So this is the Brill family. We're residents of 301 East 64th Street. We're also very unhappy about this development. I think Zachary was kind of deceiving. He never brought this up to the people who live here at 301 East 64th Street. He said we talked about it at the board meeting, but there was no quorum. It wasn't even a formal board meeting. And it was a big surprise to us last month. And I think they changed it now to no parking. But I also am a resident at the building, which I said already, but we also park our car. And I think my car was the one in the picture that he showed in the beginning of the presentation. So I think it's nice to have parking. We're losing too many spots, and I don't think it will help. And the whole story about Avis, it only happens on Sunday night. Yes, it's a problem on Sunday night. We agree that they do double park, but it's one night a week, and it's for a short period of time. So the residents, most of the people that I've spoke to are totally against this and would prefer to keep it alternate side of the street parking. There probably are a few people who are in favor of it. It wasn't even unanimous among the board members who are bringing this forward today. So I think it's quite premature and unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. Any other, is this Franklin Lastman then from the public? Can we unmute Franklin Lastman, please?
Good evening. My name is Franklin Lastman. I have lived at 301 East 64th Street since 1979. So I've seen the action in the street and I've seen what's been going on. And I am an absolute proponent of having that little bit of space made available for the reasons that I'm about to say. Yes, I agree with my colleague about Mr. Brill about the weekends, but the weekends are not the only time. There's Thanksgiving. There's Columbus Day. People line up when they can to get in, and it creates a real hazard. I think it creates a safety hazard because many times fire trucks and ambulances can't get through. They just cannot get through with all the parking that's going on. So I think the board in this case should also look at the safety issue in making its decision. As far as the environment, which we all worry about, or some of us worry about, the environment and the urban planning of our streets has got to be taken very seriously. To give up one parking space in front of our building, in many cases to satisfy the requirements of the luxury of the people who live in the building so they don't have to pay for a parking garage, is not exactly what our community should be doing. The space is impossible for people. I happen to be an older person, but there are younger people who just cannot get in, who fall. And to give up one space, is it worth it to perhaps save a life if a truck can't get through? The street is a disaster. We have Con Ed with a major building. They do work on the street. They do some, I don't know, it's a power plant. I don't know what it is. We've got Bright Horizons that has people coming in with their cars. We have a new school, the Browning School on the corner. So I asked the board, is it really worth 27 feet of space just to satisfy a few people who need to park? If they want to park, there's plenty of garages. There's a parking garage in our building. So who's going to use that parking space? I suggest some of the people who live in the building want to use that space. I don't blame them. They want to save a few bucks. But that's not good for the overall good of the people of the building. The people of the building need to have a way of getting in and out of the building, into cars, into taxis, into Ubers, et cetera, et cetera. So I beseech the board, and I know every building probably has their story, to really take a long, hard look at the possibility of giving us the space to allow egress and entrance, especially since we have Avis across the street, and they're going to be there. That building is a landmark building. It ain't going away. We have another major building across the street, and it's just not right. Environmentally, the noise level, everything you want to talk about can be considered detrimental to the welfare of the people on 64th Street. I know the people at ESNA take a good interest in what's going on, and they too have been very supportive generally of making our area a more livable thing. So to sum up, please take a look at the building, take a look at the Avis situation, take a look at the opening of another school, take a look at what all the traffic that goes there. Yes, Sunday nights are bad, but Sunday nights are bad from May the 30th until October the 1st, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and. It is a disaster. And if we take environment important, noise is a hazard. I know the city is trying to do everything possible to contain noise. It is absolutely, I'll use a fancy word, a koshmar, a nightmare for people who live in the building and people who live around the area. So I've made my plea. I hope you'll take it seriously. I have nothing else to say. I think I've covered the points. I don't agree with Mr. Brill about Zachary and what he's done. He has been as transparent as anybody. The board voted. A majority of the board voted, didn't get 100%. Maybe there's some personal interest in the board. I don't know. But this has been, we had a first sign up a while ago, then it was taken down, and now we're here. So to sum up, please consider our request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Messman. I'd like to recognize a former board member and a former co-chair of this committee, Barry Schneider.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chuck, and welcome all. I have a quick question for the representative from Orchard Realty. In the letter that was signed on February 27th by Commissioner Ed Pingthar, he states that, please note the removal of parking in front of a residential building is considered a quality of life issue that requires the majority of building residents at 301 East 64th Street to sign a petition concurring with your suggestion. Has this been accomplished, sir?
It has not been. When I reached out to the community board to follow up, they clarified this process. And that was specifically that it should be brought before the community board, and that the petition aspect of it was not necessary. If that's incorrect and we should undertake that process, I would be very happy to, but that was on the understanding of my correspondence with the council person with the community board's office.
Well, let me clarify that. The rest of the letter goes on to say, once this is completed, please present your proposal to community board A for refusal, for review, excuse me. Didn't mean to be editorializing.
Certainly. To that end, and when I initially forwarded this to the council office, I shared that aspect of it, and at least from the response that I received, it was not a necessary portion. But as I said, if this is something that the community board would like to see, then I would be happy to undertake that effort.
Well, to clarify your position, sir, if you want to speak to Ed Pinkar, did he make a mistake when he wrote that letter? Because the letter is in black and white. It says, after you got the signatures of a majority of the residents of the building, you can then come to the community board. I just think we have to observe.
Hey, it's Colleen. So what this is saying is that because this is a quality of life concern or issue, we always recommend that these requests come before the community board to be heard first before any changes are made to the parking regulations. That's what this is.
No, but Colleen Barry's saying that Ed's letter says you could get a petition signed by, a majority of people.
Yes. Yes, that's correct too. That's correct what Barry's saying as well, as what's stated in the letter.
Right. Okay, let me ask Will. Will, to your knowledge, I mean, did anyone ever tell Zachary that it's, you don't have to do this or some, I don't know. I'm not sure what, he said he had some interaction with the board office and they said you don't have to do this or not necessary, whatever.
I can go back to my email chain because I've only communicated with them in writing.
Okay. And his issue, as Barry said, requires the majority of the building residents to sign a petition concurring with your suggestion. So I think it would make sense to go back and do that as opposed to having us take any action on it tonight.
Certainly, and thank you very much, and I do appreciate that clarification, and I would be happy to undertake that.
Okay, there was some back and forth in the building, and maybe the majority favor it. We'll find out.
And can you just clarify how many units are there currently? So
it's at 140 units. I don't know whether that's what I saw in one of the things.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So we would need 70 different units represented, 71 to have a majority.
Right, exactly. Great, yes. Okay, we're going to move on unless Michelle is dying to say something, but hopefully quickly. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, no, I realize we're not going to take any action on this tonight. But as long as you're going back to the drawing board, I just wanted to say that it seems to me that this is really not the co-op's problem to solve. This is a situation that's created by Avis, and Avis is running a business, and their business is contained within the premises of their physical premises, and they have taken it upon themselves to incorporate the entire street into their business model. Now, I understand what it means when all the cars come in or all the cars go out on whatever day of the week or a holiday. I understand that, but it's up to Avis to increase their staff, to do whatever they can do to monitor the street, to have their own staff drive those cars around the corner if they have to come back to pulling in. But you're asking not only the co-op board, but the whole neighborhood to accommodate Avis. I mean, and what role is Avis playing here? What is Avis doing to be friendly and accommodating and a good neighbor? So if you're going back to this petition, which probably would not change my mind because I'm in opposition to those parking spots being taken away and no parking, because as you well know, we have this issue all over the city. But having said that, we're trying to compensate for the errors and for the lack of due diligence of a business before we even ask them to do anything about it. I have to say, I don't know if you want to split these in any way, Chuck and Craig, but I wouldn't mind taking up the return to alternate sides from commercial at the other end of the street in front of the school, nursery school or whatever it is, because there's no longer a commercial entity there. And that to me would be a separate issue anyway.
We're not going to split them up and do them.
Okay, that's fine.
But let me ask Colleen a question, just so we know this for whenever this does come back. Colleen, do you know offhand whether the commercial parking was directly related to that one business, the former Gourmet Garage, or is that just typical of of corner or portions of a blocks in close proximity to Second Avenue in that portion of Second Avenue?
I want to say that, you know what, I would have to look into that, but most likely it's not, it is typical to have that, the commercial parking spot at the corner, but I would have to confirm that with borough engineering and understand the rationale, if that was requested by someone else or if that's something that we did on our own.
Okay.
Yeah, I
well,
think that would be helpful for whenever we
Yeah.
discuss this again.
Well, can I just add, will somebody be talking to Avis between now and the return of a successful petition, should there be one? Is anybody going to talk to the business?
Well, we can try to contact them and see if they, because see if they can improve that situation. We may want to call them in, actually, if they can. So
Exactly.
do that. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, if I may, I've actually already contacted the district council's office, Ms. Menon, about this matter, and I'm going to be following up on it on that end as well.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And I see you, Judy, but I do want to.
One more comment, Judy, and then we're going to move on to this.
I want to take some heat off of Zachary. He and I clearly spoke across each other in our dialogue. When he sent over the letter, he asked if the committee and full board would deem it necessary to get a petition of the signatures. And I said that would be, advisable, but not necessary, without reading the letter that said that the DOT requires it. Those are different things. We didn't require it, the DOT requires it. So you and I were just speaking past each other there. Judy, I saw you waving your hand.
Yeah, go ahead, Judy. Last word.
Yeah, Zachary showed very nice pictures. Zachary, you did a good job. The street has not looked like what Zachary has shown for I can't tell you how long. They started working on the garage that was the school. It's going to be the high school for the Bentley, not the Bentley, the private school. Can't think of the name. It eludes me at the moment. And they started with one lane. They have taken 2 lanes of traffic now for the construction, which is going ahead full blast. So that's, there's one apartment building up from the corner of First Avenue, and then the rest is, then the school has this big chunk where they have 2 lanes out into the road. They have those orange dividers so that you have a single lane of traffic trying to get down to First Avenue to the light there. Then almost diagonally across, but not quite, and I was going to call Kathleen and Colleen and talk to her about this, you have the Con Ed substation, where they have taken a whole lane of traffic, and because they are lifting huge pieces of equipment, they do a lot of work on the weekends. Avis is not the whole problem here. It's all the other things that are going on the block. So when you turn down 64th Street, particularly on weekends, you can't turn down 64th Street if Con Ed is lifting up or taking out old pieces of equipment and putting in new pieces, and they have the most humongous hoist I've ever seen. And they go another lane also out into the street. So between the Con Ed and the school, there really should be a couple of parking spaces taken away, because if you get a truck or a bus that comes down or some large vehicle, they can't maneuver between Con Ed and the blocking space. The block is just absolutely.
Judy, that goes for a bigger study of the block, but
yeah, well, so I mean,
right,
these folks are asking for some space in front of their building. This whole block has to be looked at, and maybe Colleen needs to come out and do a little walk around and see what's going on, because there are some other changes that need to be made on that block.
Okay, thank you.
It's
All right.
totally unpassable.
We're going to move on here. I think if that's all right with everybody, because we're going to take this up if, hopefully they'll, or not, they'll get the signatures. But I think Ed's letter was pretty clear. Okay, next item is discussion of the residential parking permit program, which was postponed from May earlier this year. Craig, do you want to make some comments, introduce this subject there?
Sure. We had this originally put this item on the agenda back in May, and that was a result of there was a time when there was a state senate, if I recall, because I haven't thought about this for a while, believe there was some sort of state senate proposed legislation that included a residential parking program pilot as part of it. And we decided, since this is something that had come up in past meetings of this committee and as part of the congestion pricing task force, that it would be worth having that discussion as to whether we would be interested in endorsing the concept of a residential parking permit program. So this is more of a general discussion of whether it would make sense conceptually. There have been, I guess it was past DOT policy to oppose this, but the current commissioner has made statements, Commissioner Adonis Rodriguez has made comments, I believe, in which he is supportive of the concept of a program, but don't quote me on that, because I, again, think that's the case, but I don't want to say it definitively. That being said, the idea of a residential parking program, this has been done in other cities. Many of you may have been to Boston and seen it in action over there, where you have essentially signage in which you are limiting parking during times of different times of day or overnight periods to residents with specific tags or identifiers that allow them to park in those zones. There may or may not be charges in order to get such permits. There have been, it's helpful for those who use it, but there have been concerns raised about the fact that you do not have enough parking inventory on the street to be able to satisfy everyone. So anyone who would pay for a permit and thinks that it would be able to secure them street parking and overnight parking, that would almost certainly not be the case. There have been concerns raised in the past about how much of an administrative challenge it would be to actually implement and operate such a program. There are also concerns that have been raised regarding the fact that this would, in essence, help those people who can prove that they live in the community and having to figure out how to ensure that those who are conducting essential business or have other reasons to be parking on the street, that they aren't going to be adversely impacted disproportionately. So some people have mentioned in the past the concerns regarding, say, the staff of buildings, for example, or contractors, and so on and so forth. So it's a complicated issue, and it's up for discussion for us to, not suggesting we are taking any action, but just for us to get a sense of where people stand with it and to try to answer questions.
Colleen, we have Colleen here for a minute. Do you know what the department's position, if there is one, at this point is on this subject? Is Colleen still there? You see her blacked
She may have
out.
stepped away from her device.
Maybe she stepped away. Okay, any comments at all from the public on this? Or the board? Leah, can we unmute Leah if you can identify yourself as?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, what,
Oh, fabulous. Yes, thanks. The,
Leah, can you
Yes.
identify yourself fully?
yes, it's Leah Hanlon. I occasionally park on the street when I have a car in the city. And approximately a third of the cars that regularly park on the street don't even have New York licenses. So they're certainly not registered in Manhattan. And there are other applications for requiring cars to be registered in Manhattan. I think I said that badly, but if you do park in a garage, you get a reduction in your parking tax if you park in Manhattan. So it seems reasonable to me that there should be distinctions between cars parked in Manhattan that are registered in Manhattan and cars that are registered in Massachusetts or in Suffolk County or in Staten Island. So if you had cars that were registered in Manhattan and they got first crack at some of the spots, that wouldn't, nobody would expect that they're guaranteed a spot. It just means you're not competing with all the cars that are registered in Manhattan, in Massachusetts and Westchester and maybe Staten Island. So it seems to me to be a fair thing to do and not administratively difficult. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Leah. We have Diego Barberina. Can we unmute Diego Barberina?
Yes, I live here in 95th Street and 2nd Avenue, and I'm for these permits. I think we should use them. I mean, they are used in New Jersey, they're used in Boston, they're used in Montreal. So I think somebody should study them. And I think they should be limited by a zone, for example, like a zip code or 2 zip codes of each side or something like this, to make sure people don't commute. It should only be like for residents. And I think maybe they should charge for them, like, I don't know, $100, $150, in a way that there's a price for it, right? If it's free, everybody will have one. But if you have to pay for it, then it's different. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Paul, quickly, Paul.
Thank you, Chuck. I think it's a good idea if we're trying to look out for the interests of people in our community. All I can reflect back on is this happened in London when I lived there many, many decades ago. I had a car and they brought in residential parking permits. So only somebody in my neighborhood, in my part of London, was allowed to park in all the on-street parking. I think it cost something very low, like £50 or something a year. So I can imagine it wouldn't be that much. So if our job is to look after the people who are in our community, I think this is a great idea for them. That's it.
Let's see, any, Abraham, I have a thumbs up. I agree. Do you want to say anything, Abraham? Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, just to kind of support what Paul was saying, that I think if given kind of the changes that are going on in our community and the lack of parking because of the being Street Life Chair, seeing all of the restaurant and outdoor dining, the program, we were seeing more requests for lack of parking. So I think we should be able to do something to help the residents and support them with this parking, and then also obviously, as things are going to change with congestion pricing, any kind of relief that we can give our residents, I think, is something that we should look into seriously.
So I just want to throw a little wrinkle into this discussion. And I guess where I'm going to go with this is questioning whether we need to know a little more about a little more about what New York City DOT's plans are for changing sidewalk and curbside and parking regulations in general, as they are now beginning to be work to implement different parts of their streets plan. And Colleen, I don't know if you want to just mention this, because I assume this is going to be the focus of a future headline type of discussion at our community board meeting at some point in the future, but what some of the initiatives that are going on now and that are even starting to be piloted across on the west side in regards to smart curbs and other programs that are coming down the pipeline.
So we do have the smart curb commercial parking that we're looking at. We're exploring that, and we're working very closely with the Columbus Avenue bid. And what that is, it entails, creating additional commercial parking spaces along Amsterdam, Columbus Avenue. We've seen quite a few double parking happening there. So it's a pilot, and it has initiated, and we are studying it. And, we will definitely have more feedback to give to the community board and share with the bid as well. But, residential parking has always been, like the 800-pound gorilla in the room. That's something that, of course, we are looking at. And I want to say that, with congestion pricing coming, and coming soon, it's something that we're going to have to revisit. And I don't know what the thought is yet with it, but definitely whatever it is, we will come to the community board and let them know.
Is it something that's being actively debated within your office? You may not have heard before, but I thought there had been past comments in the past by Commissioner Rodriguez supporting the concept of residential parking permit programs.
I mean, overall, it's a concept that we're discussing with various agencies because, divisions, because our parking, of course, is involved, our borough engineering is involved, and our traffic planning management. So I don't know definitively what, the thought is in terms of pursuing this. But again, our commissioner supports this. But, we would have to, I'd have to get back to the board on that.
No, of course. But if this is something that may be coming down the pike, then that's good to know in terms of how we're going to be perhaps discussing this and debating this going forward.
In the future, yeah.
For today's conversation.
Yes.
So thank you for that. All right, I see Juno has her hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, when you say residential parking, does this mean for the whole neighborhood in Community Board 8, or does this mean like specific streets?
So it can mean different things. As other cities have done it, they have essentially zones that could vary based on the type of neighborhood and the type of the type of densities that exist and other considerations as far as how you would shape a zone. The challenge, of course, is for those who may not actually have a current registration, but maybe a resident, a car registration in New York, but be a resident. How do you address or those discrepancies that may exist? And if someone, say, moves within a neighborhood, then as Colleen said, any program would have to really be thought out really well to be able to address all of these concerns that may come up, including how you would create the different zones and whether it would be expansive within a community district or borough-wide, or even breaking up a community district into different subsections.
I think that's right.
Did you have?
Yeah, also, I just wanted to say, like, I think if we wanted to pursue this, we would have to figure out what percentage of people who are parking on parking streets actually live in that area. Because if it's just turns out that most people who are parking are residents anyway, is there really a point of us pursuing this? So I think that needs further discussion.
Yeah,
well, there's lots to decide. There's a lot to talk about, obviously.
All right, Laurie.
Okay, hi. I don't really know how I feel about this. I mean, I'll have to think about it a little bit more. But what I do know is that if we are going to do it, and I hate to sound like a broken record, we have the technology to do it correctly so that people don't make fake passes. You know, it's like, and I would really be opposed to just, you know, saying that, oh yeah, let's just do it. And like, we'll have the same situation that we have with the parking placards now. You know, it has to be with a barcode so that it can be read, you know, so that it's accurate, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm just bringing that up because I don't want to go through this again. But I'm still not endorsing the idea. I'm just saying we have to think about it some more. Okay.
No, I think you bring up a very valid point, Laurie. I think it may be a little premature to be thinking about residential parking programs when we have the placard issue that is still so omnipresent, and you have so many people that may still be parking in theoretical residential parking permit spaces if they have permits, be it legal or illegal placards that they would display. So
right. I mean, that would be a problem that would come up with this as well. You know what I'm saying? You know, because people would like, what do you do for the people who park in it and they don't have a, you know, thing? We'd have to get enforcement, you know, of that. So, I mean, there are a lot of things to think about, but I'm just throwing into the mix this issue of, you know, if we're going to do it, we have to do it so that it's actually official and not, you know, making a sign in, you know, art class.
all right, thank you, Laurie.
You're welcome.
Paul, do you have something else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just to follow on Laurie's comment, the same thing happened in London when we had the residential parking permits put in, and we all were terrified that there'd be, you know, mayhem there because everyone would park there who shouldn't be parking there. The only way it worked was we had very good enforcement, lots of traffic wardens. I remember for the years afterwards, it was much easier to find a parking space. So people were really up in arms about it. Why do we have to pay £50 a year? Change is not good for anybody. But when we got through it, a year or two later, everyone's turned around and looked, oh, it's much easier parking now. So that you're right, it only works though if someone does the enforcement in New York as well. Otherwise, it just won't work at all. We know enough already about how people park wherever they can, even if they shouldn't.
We have a history of not the great enforcement, as you know, Paul.
Right. So yeah, I should have qualified my comment earlier with that. I'm glad Laurie mentioned that.
Right. Boaz Khalil. Boaz, you comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hey, so I listened to the conversation over YouTube. I actually support a residential a restriction on the parking. It makes sense. Many cities around the world are doing it. And regarding the parking, I think that the city has a very good enforcement, and it's another way to generate money for the city. I think it's a win-win. I know that the people that owns car feel, that they are losing a lot with the congestion, with all the change. So I think it makes sense. I definitely think it makes sense. I think it's something that they can do starting tomorrow. Of course, the community board need to make sure that people that don't own a car get something out of it, right? I mean, this is because then, if you tell me, listen, there is a benefit of having of being a resident of Upper East Side and getting like a parking spot, with less competition, you'll get more people getting cars. And so you need to make sure that people that don't have a car, like myself, get something out of this program to keep me happy. And I think the majority, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, 70% of Upper East Side we are talking about Community Board 8, 70% of Community Board 8 residents don't own a car. Thank you. Other than that, great conversation. Thank you.
Will wants to add something. Will?
I actually have a question for Craig or anybody else who knows more about these programs than I do. Are they usually geographically bound, or do municipalities usually try to group areas that have the same amount of parking spots in them. The thing that I don't want to see ever happen is one neighborhood or one sector being allotted 10,000 spots and the other sector being allotted 5,000 spots, and they're paying the exact same amount. And then you have this discordant, bickering between one neighborhood and another, saying that why are we paying the same amount as this neighborhood who has this many more spots than we do?
That is a very good question, and I don't know the answer. I know that as I think about Boston, I know that they have it based off of zones, and that different neighborhoods within Boston have different are considered different zones. What I was thinking, just in terms of moving this conversation forward and thinking about how we follow up with this, that perhaps at a future meeting we would revisit this, and we would either try to bring in someone from a city in which it is a major city, ideally, in which they are operating a residential parking program, to learn about how it's working there, and the benefits that they're seeing and the challenges that they're witnessing or having to work to overcome. Or even if we can't get someone, that perhaps I do research and can put something together to give everyone a sense of it.
I think that's a good idea, Craig. I think we should try to get somebody from Boston. It's easy enough to get somebody on Zoom. I'm sure we can.
And there are other cities that do it, but Boston just keeps coming to mind because in many ways, Boston, from a transportation standpoint, is most similar to New York.
I believe San Francisco does as well, right?
San Francisco, I believe, does also. San Francisco, I think, has a different set of challenges.
That's right.
That's true. Why don't we go to Alita Camp and go ahead, Alita.
I lived in LA for a lot of years, which has more cars than any place, and they had residential parking permits. What was frustrating as someone who didn't necessarily live in different neighborhoods was that there is, and in LA, you don't have any choice. You are in a car to get any place. This was before their public transportation boom, but it was hard when you wanted to go to a store, go to a restaurant, go to someone's house who who lived in an apartment building without guest parking, to park. And so it meant a loss of business. And that's the only other thing that I wanted to bring up is I think residential parking permits are a great idea, but people come into the Upper East Side to frequent restaurants, to frequent our esteemed, renowned cultural institutions. So we need to be sure that there are parking places. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a parking permit, but just to make sure with closing of garages, it's hard. Cars have a purpose, and people use cars to get to places where they go to the restaurants, or they go to the stores, or they go to the museums. That's all I want to say. And as for BOAC's point of view, and I appreciate a concern for everyone else, we also have the densest residential community in the city. And so it's hard if we're, on the one hand, if we are given more spaces, it may be, and everyone is paying the same thing, it doesn't seem fair. But on the other hand, we're paying a lot of money and we're crammed into space, and then we wouldn't have the same resources that other neighborhoods have. So there are often two sides to every issue. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Leah Hanlon, let's make that the last word, because I think we should do what Craig says and get someone to talk about the program here, and that might help us a lot in our discussions.
Thank you for taking me again. Just a quick thought. You could investigate this, but I really don't think there are a lot of people driving their car from one neighborhood of Manhattan to another. I mean, there could be the exception that proves the rule, but especially with congestion pricing coming, there's not going to be a whole lot of inter-Manhattan driving by residents. You could just say it's all Manhattan residents can park in Manhattan, and you don't have to allocate spots to different neighborhoods. You could just say 50% of the streets are, or 50% of the spots are for residents, or whatever, however you do it. But you really don't have to get all in the weeds about block by block, because I don't think there's a whole lot of people driving from the west side to the east side. That's just it. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, we'll get some people who've actually done it and talk about the problems and how they've implemented it. I think that will be helpful. So good beginning discussion here, but I think to be continued. Okay. Item number 4 is something that Craig has been working on, and his presentation of crash mapper data and other open source transportation data of interest to community. District 8. Take it away, Craig.
Well, thank you, Chuck. Very excited to be able to show this to everyone. So as Chuck mentioned, especially since we had what we would consider a lighter agenda this month, I took it upon myself to try to put together some information that I thought would be helpful in order to be able to set some context in terms of what is actually going on within Community District 8, just in terms of the world of transportation. And especially, some of you may have heard, we've had, especially over the past month, this surge in pedestrians that have been hit by vehicles and have been injured. I think there was another one last night, so it's been 5 within the last few weeks, I believe. So I just wanted to try to take a fresh look at some of the data that's out there, and to be able to, for those who haven't seen us talk about Crash Mapper before, see what's available in terms of the data that's out there and what it means for our community. So we'll actually, if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen. Let's hope this works.
Thumbs up. We gave you the thumbs up.
Let's see. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Oh, it's right now. Yes, now we can.
Okay, excellent. So before we get into Crash Mapper data, what I would like to do is first take you to the New York State DOT traffic data viewer, because this actually has some really helpful information in terms of understanding what traffic volumes are like. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer here, and I should have noted this on the slide. Most of the data here, or pretty much all of it, is from 2019. So it is pre-pandemic. So we need to take this with a grain of salt in terms of not having a full understanding of how traffic has changed since then. But this New York State Traffic Viewer provides AADT, which stands for Average Annual Daily Traffic Information, on roads all across the state and roads here within our community district. So the dots actually indicate places where they have conducted traffic counts, and you're able to pull up the information here. And what I've tried to do, because I didn't know how this would work in terms of trying to display it here, is that I put it into the presentation. So I just want to highlight a few things here. So I have, for different locations, average annual daily traffic. So that's essentially the typical traffic every day. And then also the truck traffic, so we can just see where our truck corridors or where we have heavy truck usage. So I first just want to focus on the FDR drive, because when we get to Crash Mapper data, this is going to be some of a focal point. So just starting with the northbound on and off ramps within our district, you can see here that we're seeing about 14,000 people exiting at 61st Street on a daily basis. Not so different at 96th Street, but you also have 21,000 cars getting on at 96th Street. On the southbound side, we don't have numbers quite as large getting on at either 92nd Street, 7,200 or so vehicles getting off at 73rd, keep that in mind, and then 5,600 cars or so entering the FDR drive at 73rd Street. And then at 63rd Street, the off-ramp there is seeing a lot of traffic with 15,000 vehicles getting off on a daily basis. So then I want to just call to your attention the avenues here, and I put in parentheses where we've had the actual traffic counts that have been taking place. And you can see where you can see the different volumes, and I just want to highlight First Avenue has the highest amount of traffic of all the avenues. Second and third are relatively close. And second, there were actually numerous locations in which they had measured it in 2019. Not so much variation between 91st, 83rd, and 82nd and 68th streets. Traffic is significantly lower on the narrower sorry, I didn't mean to do that. On the narrower avenues such as Lexington and Fifth Avenue. There was no data, unfortunately, for Madison Avenue, and Park Avenue. We had to sort of extrapolate because there was data at 59th Street, and of course at 59th, there's a lot of activity coming out of Midtown and vehicles going in towards the bridge. And then by the time you get north of our district to 102nd Street, it tails off significantly. On the crosstown streets, one thing that is of particular interest, at least in terms of some of the congestion pricing discussion that we're thinking about, was that you had about 31,000 vehicles daily who were exiting the Queensboro Bridge on the upper roadway, which is the one roadway that is proposed to not be tolled coming into the city into Manhattan as part of the congestion pricing plan. Excuse me, I forgot to mention, just in terms of trucks, that the truck corridors clearly seem to be Second and Third Avenues and Lexington Avenue see a lot of truck traffic. But just getting back to the Queensboro Bridge, that is an important consideration as well, just to see the pure numbers. Also, what I found really fascinating was that the transverses are seeing really high traffic volumes, but they flow probably much better without traffic lights and without the same level of same amount of disruptions within the right of way there. So it doesn't necessarily seem as if traffic and congestion is as much of an issue on the transverses, but they handle a lot of traffic. And then I want to also highlight the fact that between 60th and 63rd Streets, and actually between up and through 65th Streets, you do have a range from 5,000 to 15,000 at 63rd Street, and even 17,000 on 62nd Street. And again, that's because of a lot of activity related to the bridge. So you can see why those areas around 2nd Avenue especially tend to be trouble spots. And then the numbers seem to tail off, aside from the major crosstown streets with 2 lanes in each direction. So 72nd has 12,000 vehicles a day, 79th Street, 15,000, 86th Street, 13,000. But then you get to some of the streets with lesser traffic, with lesser amounts of traffic, and you're down to 2,800 vehicles a day. And then of course, 96th Street is high. So I just want to at least bring that context in and alert you to the fact that if anyone wants to play around with data, I did link to it in this presentation. We'll make sure that it is posted and you can go in and take a look at it. Now, for Crash Mapper data, I'm going to try to look at some of these maps in a live fashion. Let's hope this works. Otherwise, I will rely on the charts I have coming up. All right, so for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Crash Mapper is essentially just taking publicly available information and mapping it out and synthesizing it. And you're able to break it down based off of different geographies, including community boards. So I here have highlighted Community District 8. And it allows you to then filter by different types of crash, and you get summaries of all of the figures here. So I've put in here 2 years worth of information for us to be able to take a look at. And you can, it's meant to be able to depict based on the size of the circles, the amount of activity, and then you can hone in on it to see the total number of crashes at different locations and the number of injuries related to those crashes and even fatalities. So this over here is just the general figure of all types of crash activities that have occurred within Community District 8. So you can sort of get it's like a heat map where you could see where you have a lot of activity, but it's sort of hard to tell just because there's so many circles over here. But as you focus in on different categories, you can get a better sense. The numbers become a little more evident. So this here is just looking at crashes involving cars and SUVs, so your standard types of vehicles. And you could see, essentially, especially along the avenues, here's 2nd Avenue, that you have more activity. The darker colors, the darker oranges, are locations in which injuries occurred, whether it be motorist injuries or pedestrian injuries or cyclist injuries. You could see a lot of activity along the FDR Drive as well. And then when you focus specifically on just those crashes that involve injuries and fatalities, you could see how that maps out as well. And it sort of follows the same pattern. Let me just go to a few more to point out. So I don't need to show all of these, but again, I have links to the last 2 years, or the last year, excuse me, the last year of data. That's why I had actually tried to do it for 1 year, which would hopefully allow you to see some patterns over here. You could see where incidents involving trucks took place, and I'll just show this here quickly. The reds indicate locations where there are fatalities, unfortunately. Bicycles, motorcycles, and mopeds. And I'm going to then move on and show you a few graphics here. Again, 2nd Avenue, even though it has a lot of the amenities in place, is still, perhaps because it has a much higher or a higher amount of traffic, there's more unfortunate activity in terms of crashes and injuries, but definitely you can see a trend over there. In terms of motorists, people in motor vehicles that were injured, the data does change a little, and you have the highest activity taking place seemingly along the FDR Drive and seemingly near the exit and entrances and exits, such as near 73rd Street and near 96th Street. And for whatever reason, the size of the maps aren't always indicative of the proportionate amount of activity that occurred there. And then just quickly, some pedestrian injuries and fatalities. And again, this is these were motorist injury and fatalities, people in motor vehicles. And then finally, I'll just show you cyclists quickly. And again, this is over the last 12 months. So 1st and 2nd Avenues, not surprisingly, because they have a higher amount of biking activities, have more injury activity. So let me just take you through a few highlights here in terms of some of the graphics that I had put up. Sorry, as my computer starts to put in a few things. So just looking at crash history, and I'm just zooming out a little bit to look at over the past 10 years. And what I want to highlight here is the fact that, not surprisingly, there was a shift that coincided with COVID. I did it using October to September timeframe so we could get a full 10 years in, and the data is updated within a few days. So this data encompasses the entirety of September 2023. But you could see back 10 years ago, we were near 5,000 total crashes, and in the past year it was only about 1,300. But the number of people that are injured in these did not decline at the same level and didn't decline all that much relatively to the number of crashes. And that holds true whether it's cyclists who are injured, motorists that were injured, or pedestrians that were injured. Although I do have to say there has been more of a reduction in pedestrians being injured than motorists. And that could be a result of traffic calming measures that have been put in. That could be a result of Vision Zero initiatives. But when you visualize this in some graphics, you can see here, this is the total number of crashes over the years, and you can see the large dip. The number of persons injured has not really changed all that much. And then here's that specific detail in terms of total injuries. So we did have the dip related to when there was definitely less activity due to COVID in that year, but that number has been creeping up. And in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, as I said, pedestrian injuries have decreased but are starting to creep up. Cyclist injuries have remained relatively stagnant. Now, you could also make the case that that is because of the exponential increase in biking that has occurred. So rates have gone down, but we're still seeing a similar level of injuries taking place now as was the case 10 years ago, even with more amenities in place. So again, let me just try to separate avenues and streets. So this line here represents the FDR drive. So you can see how much more activities taking place on the FDR drive than elsewhere. And then again, that could be just based off of traffic volumes and speeds as well, but there are definitely more crashes taking place along the FDR drive. And in terms of crashes with injuries, it is at a different level for the FDR drive over there. As far as the other avenues, there has been more separation. Second Avenue tended to have the highest amounts of crashes historically, significantly higher than the others. As we got to the last year, that has really come down quite a bit, and you have a lot more bunching in terms of what's going on across all the avenues over there. So second, third, and first are the ones that are higher than Madison Park and Lexington in fifth. But the good news is that there are fewer crashes, but crashes with injuries really haven't taken much of a dip. On the right-hand side, I just tried to visualize it differently just so you could see it in each of the avenues in proportion to each other. It's the same data as what's on the left. I tried to do the same thing with cross streets, breaking it down into 5 segments of 5 blocks. So 60th to 64th, and every 5 blocks, so on and so forth, with an extra block between 85th and 90th and 91st and 96th. And here what's jumping out is the fact that it's much more dangerous, if you will, down in the lower 60s, from 60th to 64th Street. And unfortunately, I don't have the data for 59th Street because it wasn't included in our community district's data. But as I mentioned before, perhaps it's because you have a lot more activity on those cross streets. You're getting much higher numbers of crashes, but there is a clear difference over there. And it's the same as it was with avenues. We're not seeing a huge dip in terms of, or over time in terms of the amount of injuries that are taking place. And you could see, just again, laying this out differently year to year, you can see how the amounts of the number of crashes has continued its downward trend, but the total injuries has not really budged all that much. By hour of day, so on the top left, we have the total crashes, and then we have injuries, total injuries, pedestrian injuries, and cyclist injuries. So again, they're on different scales. Just to take you through the course of a typical day, not surprisingly, few crashes in the overnight hours. And then you have more incidents taking place during the day. and then they tail off as the evening goes on. I was wondering whether I'd see a correlation in terms of when it's dark out. I didn't see all that much in terms of the number of crashes, but you do tend to see, as opposed to this number coming down pretty consistently as the afternoon and evening moves on, the numbers did not drop nearly as quickly when it came to injuries. And that could be a result of nighttime activities and it just being more dangerous for both pedestrians and cyclists during those times of days. And for pedestrians and cyclists, although the peak in terms of crash activity was 3 p.m., there were more injuries taking place at 5 p.m. during the 5 p.m. hour than the 3 p.m. hour. And you see similar data here with cyclist injuries where they peaked around 7 o'clock at night. All right, in terms of cyclical activity over the course of the year, relatively consistent, but interestingly enough, there are more pedestrian injuries, and it's a statistically significant number in December than it is during other months. But otherwise, there weren't really many variations in terms of seasonality. For cyclist injuries, it sort of matches up with there being more cycling activity during the summer. So again, just to highlight a few of the key findings, we've had fewer crashes post-pandemic, but injuries remain relatively high compared to the amount of crashes. Pedestrian injuries are starting to occur more frequently. Once again, cycling's become safer relative to the amount of cycling activity, but there are still the rate or the extent of cycling injuries hasn't really gone down much. Second Avenue which had a higher rate of crashes, is now more equivalent to the other wider avenues, meaning First and Third Avenues. The rates of crashes with injuries on the FDR Drive has not declined significantly as the graphics showed. There are high rates of crashes at the FDR Drive entrances and exits, especially at 73rd Street. And I mentioned 60th and 64th Streets being target areas. And then what I had mentioned just before about pedestrian injury rates highest in December and highest in the summer for cyclists, and higher rates of crashes in the PM peak compared to the AM, and that cyclists are more vulnerable at night. So this is just meant to provoke some discussion and thoughts, just to, again, give us an idea as to where we are now. I think overall there is some good news in here, but I think this does speak to perhaps some of the things that we may want to be talking about as a board in terms of how we can hopefully reduce the amount of crashes that occur, and the amounts of people, the numbers of people getting injured as a result of crashes taking place within our community district.
Greg, thanks very much for all this work. It's great stuff. We're glad to have your expertise in being able to put this thing together. It's a big help, I think, to the committee and to the board. And so why don't we take some questions here, and I think we have a member of the public, Leah Hammond, first. Why don't we go ahead, Leah?
Thanks. Craig, that was really awesome. Those charts are great. I wanted to ask, though, where the data comes from, and whether it includes data from bicycles and e-vehicles hitting pedestrians, because I was kind of shocked to learn recently that the police do not take reports and do not give police reports for those crashes. I knew this actually a couple of years ago when one of my neighbors was hit by a bike and hospitalized. But apparently it's to the point that Liz Kruger is actually speaking to the police about trying to make them take crash reports, but it is their policy not to. So what kind of data about e-bikes and what hitting people are in the reports that you just had? Thanks.
Thank you for that question, Leah. The data is just coming from New York City open data portals that exist. So just reading from the Crash Mapper website, it says collision data is updated from the New York City open data portal daily or as soon as new data becomes available, with a sweep back 1 month to catch recently updated data. It uses vehicle collision data for New York City from starting in August 2011, aggregated from and normalized from the New York City open data portal, NYPD motor vehicle collisions, and an NYPD crash data Band-Aid database. I guess that is. I'm not familiar with that other one, but this, given that it's open data, New York Police, NYPD is collecting information whenever something is reported to them, and then it goes into it, and then it immediately gets uploaded into here. So it's obviously only going to be as good as the police reports that are filed, but that the data, as I mentioned, is comprehensive and all-inclusive.
And Craig, oh, sorry. Just to clarify, Liz Kruger's thing was about the difference between police reports between bike accidents and e-bike accidents. They didn't differentiate between the two. It wasn't that the police reports don't include police reports for whenever somebody gets hit by a bike or an e-bike. Those two are both accumulated together, and that's what her issue was.
Right. And if you look at the Crash Mapper map itself and you try to segregate it by e-bike, you're going to have very little data because I think it all gets aggregated into that broader category.
But it does have bikes there, yeah. Okay. Why don't we get Paul quickly?
Thank you, Chuck. Firstly, thank you, Craig. That was really, really helpful. I'd love the slides if you don't mind sending them around. That'd be very helpful as well. Thank you for all the work. I would like this board to focus on those numbers, those three numbers that jumped out at me. In 10 years, in our neighborhood on the Upper East Side, in 10 years, 41 people have been killed on our streets and 5,500 people have been injured. I just want to make clear to everyone here, you might be thinking injured doesn't sound so bad, maybe it's just a scrape or something. I think the vast majority of those injuries are life-altering injuries. When a human being comes into contact with 4 or 5 tons of metal going at even 20, 30 miles an hour, it's not just a scratch. So I really want us to focus on those numbers. And perhaps when we're looking at safe street designs that come before this board, we should have this data alongside whatever we're talking about. And I would ask, it's a plea, I guess, to my fellow board members, next time I speak about something for pedestrian safety or bike safety or just human safety, I'd like us all to remember these three numbers, 10, 41, and 5,500. In 10 years, 5,500 people have been seriously injured with life-altering consequences, on top of the awful 41 of our neighbors have been killed. I'd like us to remember that. That's why I asked for this stuff. It's not just because it's a nice to have. This is why. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Paul. Alita? We unmute Alita.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Clearly, there was a lot of work that went into it, and it's illuminating. I'm wondering if this committee either has had and I missed it, or could get someone with a specialty in safety issues. As Paul mentioned, there are terrible statistics to talk about it. Julie Menon has talked about illuminating crosswalks at night to make them safer for pedestrians. Bikes are supposed to have, but often don't have any kinds of lights. That's something that should be enforced. Visibility would seem to be crucial. Also, I'm wondering, there's so much traffic on 59th Street to go over the bridge that routinely Lexington Avenue is blocked because the cars are blocking the box. And on 2nd Avenue, I mean on 3rd or 1st, when you're turning, if you want to go on the FDR Drive, there is a lot of traffic. There's a bus lane, there's double parking, there are people trying to turn. And if there's a way to figure out where the accidents are coming from, and if some adjustments were made, 72nd and 3rd or 2nd was an issue, or 1st, and I think some adjustments, maybe a left turn signal were made, what impact has that had on crashes? It's just being able to parse it a bit more. And the other thing is that there were omissions in the cross street data because 84th and 85th Street as entrances and exits from the transverse get a ton more traffic than the quieter streets of 83rd or 82nd or 88th Street. I don't know about in the 60s. And that's something that would be interesting to see, because if there are 24,000 cars coming off the transverse at 84th and 5th, many of them are continuing to go up 84th Street all the way east, including trucks, which are not supposed to be there at all. But thank you very much, Craig. It's really useful to have all of this information. I'd just like to see some more detail, if that, or not detail, but just some more ability to break it down if that were possible. But thank you. Thank you, Chuck.
And the gap in that part of the community district is unfortunate. There is the only date I just went to double check in regards to 84th, 85th Street is that in 2018, average daily traffic coming off the transverse was about 9,500 vehicles, and it was measured on at a different time a few years earlier. Between 5th and Madison, the volume was about 9,000. So order of magnitude, it seems as if most people are proceeding through the intersection at 5th Avenue and 84th Street as opposed to making the right turn on 5th Avenue. But I don't know at what point further east those vehicles are turning off of 84th Street.
I could tell you that there is, whenever there's a lot of traffic coming through the park, there's a lot of traffic on 84th Street, and the same for 85th. I walk along there, I'm near there, and I just see it. So those are, I guess, outliers to your other data about quieter side streets. And I don't know what's true in the 60s for going across to the west side at 65th. Or coming east again. But I just think that those blocks or streets, and as far east, even I'd say to East End or to First or York, should just be looked at separately, and that generalizations can't be made at all. But I think if we could support maybe Julie Menon and know more about that legislation to have brighter lights for longer time on the crosswalk, maybe, or maybe there's independent research, but she had mentioned that at the full board meeting when she spoke to us.
Stephanie Reckler. Stephanie?
Yes, I don't know how many of you attended the Civitas webinar on Tuesday, I think yes, Tuesday. It's a 6-part session, and the next one, next Tuesday, is a site visit to Madison Avenue and 96th Street. I think seeing it is better than just hearing about it. So I'm looking forward to it, and I suggest, Will, perhaps you can send the particulars out to everybody.
If everybody wants to look at their e-blast that they receive and they scroll down to the announcement section, you'll find the information for the Civitas event.
Okay.
And that intersection at 96 and Madison is a tricky intersection. There's a lot going on over there, and New York City DOT has recently upgraded it, but it was an intersection that, on looking at Crash Mapper data, over the past year, there have definitely been a number of incidents that have occurred over there. I'm looking now, 12 crashes, 4 injuries over the past year at Madison and 96th Street.
So these statistics are all very interesting, but the question is, what are we going to do about it? And that's something I think we have to explore.
Right, and that was essentially the intent of trying to do this, in order to open up this discussion to see if there are potential initiatives that we want to, looking forward, be thinking about and discussing in terms of street safety and traffic calming, whatever the solutions may be. And it would be interesting also to be able to engage with New York City DOT to see if they would be able to tie back some of these trends to work that they have done. We do know there have been transformations that have taken place along some of the avenues. I should have noted Second Avenue, part of the drop that took place in terms of the number of crashes post 2016 may very well be related to the fact that Second Avenue subway construction had ended and the street was finally able to be complete, if you will, both in terms of the construction being complete and having the complete street design in place fully. So that has perhaps had an impact. Third Avenue is, we're going to be able to see what the impacts of that are when that's done. And in fact, when we get to new business, I do want to bring up a concern regarding Third Avenue. But as streets have been transformed and as we've seen with post-COVID, there are now more things taking place along the curbside that also may be serving the purpose of calming traffic, that may be reducing the number of incidents, but also, as I said, we still have a lot of injuries. Why is that? I don't have the expertise or background information or data to be able to answer that question.
Boaz wants to be recognized, so go ahead, Boaz.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, really quick. I just want to say, Craig, thank you very much with your diligent work with the data, retrieving the data, analyzing it. Really, great job. I've attended many different communities, committees meetings, ranging from housing to budget discussion. And often I find that many of those conversations lack concrete data, statistics, or definition. We are talking about stuff and it's not clear what are we talking. It's refreshing to see data that provided context and highlight the issue, So I want to thank you, Craig, and I really hope to see more data and statistics in more community board meetings. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Boaz. So Judy Schneider. Hey, Judy.
Hi. Going back to something Stephanie brought up, I too was at the Civitas meeting yesterday, and I think one of the very important things that was presented, I don't know if that meeting is recorded, Chuck, and if you and Craig can look at it, but they were talking about recessed crosswalks and how that cut down on driving incidents and bike incidents and so on. And it's apparently been done in other cities, but we don't do it here. And I certainly think that was a major part of the presentation, is something that we should be looking into and talking about.
Thank you. Thanks, Judy. Paul Crickler.
I want to follow on from what Judy just said, and also Stephanie. I thought the Civitas session was really informative. For those of you who haven't seen it, the next week's going to be a live meeting, as we heard, but then there'll be once a week Zoom sessions with some of the really talented people, important people. One is the Commissioner of DOT, Rodriguez, is doing one session. A guy called Mike Lydon, who's a well-known traffic and urban transit engineer. My thought from this, Craig, you were asking about what could we focus on. It's exactly, I think, what Judy was talking about, intersections. I've seen a statistic where for some part of the city, 50% of the major injuries and deaths were at intersections. I think the Civitas presenter had it at 23 or 25%, but either way, that would be a fruitful target. And there are a whole bunch of things that this city does already, and a whole bunch it doesn't do, that could be done to safeguard intersections. Things like daylighting, making sure cars aren't parked within a few feet of the intersection. Pedestrians can see the cars coming, and importantly, the cars can see the pedestrians. Things like raising the crosswalk in some neighborhoods that slows the traffic down on an interstate where people are vulnerable. Things like making the junction a little bit narrower, bottlenecking it. I'm not saying all these things should happen everywhere, but this is the toolkit that modern city designers have and are starting to use here in New York already. So my suggestion for us as a community board is to follow on from what I think other community boards have started doing, is to ask DOT to focus on safety measures at intersections in a neighborhood. I believe one CB in Brooklyn was doing that only last week. I think it was CB1. I think other CBs are starting to as well. That's my suggestion and vote.
I think those are all very, very wise ideas for us to consider.
With Rita Popper.
Craig is always incredible. I have a question about, we've spent a great deal of money on bike lanes. What are the data of crashes that are not on streets with bike lanes, or that the crashes did not happen in a bike lane? This only comes to mind. I was crossing 2nd Avenue and a car with a bike whizzed by me, but not in the bike lane. So I just wonder, are the bike lanes helping? Are they preventing accidents, or it doesn't matter?
I think it definitely matters. The data that I have available to assess, I can't really tell because I don't have side-by-side data looking at the amount of bike traffic along the sections of road with bike lanes versus the number of crashes that are occurring involving cyclists. I think the numbers speak for themselves to an extent that they seem to be higher on those avenues. But again, that's because the amount of traffic taking place there in terms of cycling is exponential compared to the other roads where there are fewer cyclists, because they're avoiding them because they're inherently dangerous without having any amenities whatsoever. So that's again where we would need New York City DOT to be able to provide some of those answers, because they have the data that's available, and they're obviously conducting post-implementation analyses of all the projects that they're implementing. So,
Craig, if I may, if you recall last year, DOT actually did come to present to this committee about the benefits of protected bike lanes. And if you look at their presentation from last year, page 23, protected bike lanes benefit all street users. Crashes go down by 15%. On those streets. Motor vehicle occupant injuries go down 15%, and pedestrian injuries go down 21%. Those are using their statistics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
I was just speaking to our community district specifically, where I couldn't substantiate it off of our data. But yes, that is helpful. So thank you, Will.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Leah Hanlon, comment?
Thank you. I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Craig, does your data distinguish between right turns and left turns? The reason I ask is I have noticed, since almost getting creamed by a moving truck recently that blew through the crosswalk to make an illegal right turn on the red, that there are a lot of vehicles, from moving trucks all the way down to bicycles, that don't seem to understand that there are no right turns on the red in New York City. And in fairness to people from other places, it's not like there's a giant billboards when you enter the tunnel that says no rights on the red in New York City. So does the data distinguish between that? Because that's kind of low-hanging fruit. If you can just make it clear with signs here and there throughout the city that there are no rights on the red, maybe it would stop some of those turns.
Yeah, the data that's used for Crash Mapper doesn't make that level of distinction. I can, from what I can see, and from performing this exercise, there is a field here called contributing factors. And overwhelmingly, and this may just be the way that they coded that NYPD codes it or interprets it, in the majority of cases, it's either unspecified or linked to driver distraction or inattention. And failure to yield the right of way is way down there in terms of causes of injuries or causes of crashes. So just looking at the past year, with 1,309 crashes, 1,026 were considered, and sometimes it could be multiple things mentioned. 1,026 were unspecified, 687 driver distraction, 102 following too closely, 77 failure to yield right away, and so on and so forth. So it's a relatively small percentage, at least as the data presents it.
Thanks, Greg. Paul, quickly.
Thank you, Chuck. There was some data about this left hand versus right turn at the Civitas presentation. And I think he said it was 3 times more crashes for left turn lanes than right turn. So that's
that was my understanding of things too, that the left turn lane is left turn is more dangerous than the right turn.
I mean, I know it's irritating when someone tries to turn right on the red, which they shouldn't do. It's more than irritating.
Right.
But the main point I wanted to make was exactly to Will's point. Everyone benefits. I know I've made this point before when I was arguing about the crosstown bike lanes and about the 3rd Avenue bike lane. But I remember the numbers were sort of singed into my brain. There was a study done at 1st Avenue against 3rd Avenue before 3rd Avenue had the bike lane put in 2 years ago, I think it was. And I think it's for a year period, the number of serious injuries went down, or compared 1st to 3rd, was 180 on 1st Avenue and 80, significantly less than half, on the avenue without the bike lane. And the number of deaths was 5 or 6 down to 1, I think. And what was interesting about this is every single category of people had a lower number of injuries: pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. And oddly enough, the actual number of cyclists that declined was actually much less. It was about flat, down marginally. But that disguises the fact that the number of people cycling went up exponentially. And so you don't expect to see, when a bike lane's put in, you'd hope to see the number of people being 0 killed, but there's such a boom. We have the same number of people being killed on bikes. Just so you're all aware, this year, 24 people in New York City, like myself, who ride a bike, have been killed on the streets of the city. Just so you know, since Vision Zero came in 2014, 200 of our fellow New Yorkers have been killed in the city. We've had some of them speaking, the relatives speaking, as recently as last year, talking about the crosstown bike lanes. Carling Mott, 28-year-old woman riding a bike across 85th Street, and she was killed in a bike lane, a bike lane with paint. This is why, folks, I guess tonight's the night I keep saying this. This is why I talk about this stuff so much. Everyone benefits, not just cyclists.
Will, did you want to add anything? I see your hand up.
I did. And I always tell people there's a reason why district managers should never live in the district that they represent or that they work for, because then your pet issue becomes the issue that you want people to talk about. But I noticed that Craig pointed out in his statistics that 59th Street and Park Avenue are where our office is located. So where I'm often most in the Upper East Side is the busiest location according to his data that he presented. And I have increasingly become so concerned about crossing that street. Every time I go into the office, I nearly get run over by a car who is trying to turn left from Park Avenue onto 59th Street and ignores the red light, ignores the fact that there's a crosswalk, and tries to run over any pedestrians in their way. And it doesn't matter if it's in the afternoon, in the morning, when I go into the office, there is inevitably a car illegally in the crosswalk there, and then proceeds to turn into the Park Avenue, between the malls, and will ignore the lights, ignore the crossing signals, and ignore where they have to push pedestrians into the street. And it has become such a danger to pedestrians that I feel like I had to say something when I saw that statistic. And it was very disappointing, not on you, Craig, because you can't control the data, that we didn't actually see how dangerous that intersection is, because the numbers present that there is a ton of cars there, and it is so dangerous that the cars are ignoring the crosswalk and ignoring the lights and the signals and making it so dangerous for pedestrians. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm glad that I wasn't crazy, that like I'm seeing that these cars are outrageous there.
Well, maybe as a follow-up, Craig, we should have DOT come in to talk about some of these issues and what can be done at intersections and what some of the things they may have, coming up to deal with some of these issues, because I think, it's interesting. The data is certainly interesting, and we can talk to them about some of that. So
Yeah.
why don't we do that, and appreciate again your efforts here. I think it's very helpful to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be helpful. I think also with congestion pricing likely to begin in the spring of 2024, that may impact traffic patterns and conditions in the low 60s. It's obviously hard to know whether that will result in a safer environment for all, but that is, I think, probably one of the maybe not a stated intent, but some potential benefit that could occur once congestion pricing is in place.
Good,
and I think also the idea of restricting left turns is another strategy to go along with what Paul was mentioning as something that we may want to discuss at strategic locations. And certainly 60th and 59th Street and Park Avenue is one of those locations. And Park Avenue, anywhere you try to make a turn with the center mall presents a lot of challenges. It is not an ideally engineered corridor.
Right.
To say the least.
Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for letting me rant. Sorry, Chuck.
That's okay. No, it's an appropriate thing to do, and it is an issue. Okay, updates from Harbor Transportation. Colleen.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Craig, I was going to say, Craig, Chuck, and Will, let's follow up about that, what you just mentioned, Will, and we'll see what we can do about that location.
Good, thanks. Any word on update?
Sure. So we have issued our 2023 holiday construction embargo. It begins on November 15 and it ends on January 2nd. And what that is that we have suspended construction work in the roadways. The only work that we would allow is if it's an emergency work. And the reason why we do this is because we know that during the holiday season, it gets hectic, it gets really busy, and it's additional traffic congestion. So construction in these, along in CB8 district and citywide is on hold until the embargo ends. So if you notice any construction that's happening, feel free to email myself or let Will know, and we'll have an inspector go out there. The other thing is that I want to thank Michelle. Michelle reached out to me last week regarding an outdoor dining structure that was being constructed, and the owner did not certify, and they were attaching the structure to the building. So Michelle, thank you for letting us know, because as a result, we issued an encroachment notice, and we also alerted DOB, and DOB also issued a stop work order to the restaurant owner. As you know, the new program is going to be launched next year. So we are not taking any new applicants to self-certify until the program has launched. So just flagging that for the community board, so you're aware of that. So if you notice anything that's going on, any activities, please let me know or let Will know, and we'll have an inspector go out there. And we continue to mill and pave. I know that's been delayed because of the rain. We've had a lot of rain. So I ask that you, bear with us, and thanks for your patience. But that's it. Thank you.
Michelle, did you want to Any comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Colleen, because you very promptly had some people up there right after I told you about it. I appreciate that. I was actually by there again today, and what was a wooden platform attached to the building now appears to be a concrete one. Now, I know your team is supposed to go back and follow up, so I just want to alert you to that. Maybe you want to go back sooner than later. And I also reported to you, and I just wondered whether or not you got over there, on 77th Street west of 2nd. There are 3 businesses that are out of business. I think I sent you photos as well. And yet their sidewalk cafes are standing there and they're abandoned. Did you get that email from me?
I didn't get that email. And Michelle, if you can just let me know the names and the addresses, that would be really helpful.
Okay, well, the names are very hard to see because the businesses are closed.
Okay, the addresses would be helpful if there's an address on it as well.
All right, I'll be more descriptive in the email. I don't know if I can get you an exact address. It swings around and goes west on 77th. There are 3 abandoned businesses all in a row that all have abandoned sheds. What's their, by the way, what is the responsibility? Does DOT take them down, or do you go back to the previous owner and make them take it down? What's the protocol?
So the protocol is that DOT we take them down. We work with sanitation to remove them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll follow up. Thank you.
Michelle.
Abraham?
Yeah, I think, Michelle, you're referring to the old Innocent Yesterday and Zazzy's on 77.
Maybe that's what she means. Yeah.
I think so. So Colleen, the old Innocent Yesterday, that's 252 East 77th, and it goes from there to the corner. And those were establishments that were recently shut down for health violations, so they are effectively abandoned.
Okay,
Is that if that's on the southwest corner, Abraham, and then that's the southwest corner of 2nd. There's the pizza store.
Correct.
But then as you swing around 77th going west towards 3rd, you have the 2 other abandoned businesses and
Yeah,
sheds.
the one at the end is Innocent Yesterday. I'm blanking on the little one in the middle, and then Zazzy's is the one on the corner, the former pizza place. So they were all the same owner, and they've all been closed and abandoned.
Right.
Thank you. We have all the information at our fingertips. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wait, Colleen, I want to actually bring up a few things. First, so we have seen the progression of 3rd Avenue. And for those like me who are excited about complete streets, it's looking promising. However, I have a concern, and I have been, this concern has also been brought to me by others about how the construction is proceeding in phases and how it's not being done in a way, at least in my opinion, in which it's clear that the offset parking lanes to provide the parking protected bike lanes are in place, and the bike lanes are painted on some blocks and not others, so you don't quite have the parking lanes there. The pedestrian islands haven't been constructed yet, so it's sort of in this half complete state.
Right.
But it's also, because of that, I think, creating some safety concerns, whether it be trucks that are parking in one of the moving lanes, even if the parking lane next to it is empty, because it's not clear that that's a parking lane or a commercial parking lane during certain hours, because the pedestrian islands aren't necessarily delineated as pedestrian islands. It's unclear what those areas are. I don't know if any of the parking regulation changes have occurred. So it's sort of in the state of flux, and there are concerns regarding the safety of people who are actually using the street, crossing the street, and such. So I don't know if there's anything that could be done to try to address this. And I don't know if you have any updates as far as the timeframes for getting the pedestrian islands built out, so we do have a completed project.
Craig, let me follow up with the project manager. I'll get you all of that. I know construction has started, but I didn't know all of this was happening. I know we're trying to do it in phases. And again, there was a lot of delay because of the heavy rain. So let me find out from Paula, you know, the time frame for the pet islands. I know I did get a call from an elected office about that, and I said I would follow up with the individual. So I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And
You're
then
welcome.
the second thing I just wanted to bring up, I'm just going to share my screen for 1 second, is something that I noticed right outside of my block, is this sign here, which is a New York City park sign, and I've seen this on a number of blocks in close proximity to my apartment. But I'm also a little concerned because some of the locations and outlines of these tree pits that are seemingly on their way are in locations where the sidewalk is already narrow because of stoops and such. And I'm unsure as to if there's coordination taking place between parks and DOT in terms of making sure that they're being put in places where it's not going to impinge on pedestrian clearance and clearance for people in strollers or wheelchairs or scooters or people who have mobility challenges.
So there is coordination between parks and DOT with this. And I would suggest that you follow up with parks because they're the lead agency in the tree planting. Just to get a list of locations that they're going to be installing or planting trees in the community board.
Okay, and we could hopefully work with the Parks Department
Yeah.
there. If this is a broader initiative, I think it would be helpful to see it on a broader scale. But as I said,
think it is.
but
It is.
there are some locations where if we were looking at revocable consent requests, we'd be alarmed at the insufficient amount of clearance on the sidewalks where they're proposed.
Right. I think it is a broader scale project for parks, so you might want to follow up with them and ask them about other locations.
All right, is there any old business?
Thank
new
you.
business that anyone wants to bring up before we adjourn? Okay, and I think Michelle, did you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second by Rita. Okay. Without objection, I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.